Hello, everybody, and welcome to the All Talk Paranormal. Now, I know I'm not usually on here, so it's very nice to see you all. Recently been taking a break from Facebook just because I've started a new job and I'm just really busy. So it's going to be great to see you all here. Tonight, I have an amazing guest. Ever since we did the Festival of the Unexplained, the Winter Festival, I spoke to a very, very good friend of mine regarding the Fae. And I am just ecstatic, to be honest, to be interviewing this gentleman. He was part of my, my teens and my 20s throughout the ghost hunting world. And well, he doesn't need any introductions, but I would like to welcome Mr. Barry Fitzgerald. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
We touched upon my friend Claire, and I just want to ask you, because obviously I know who you are, but quite a lot of the younger generation possibly won't. But you started with Ghost Hunters, didn't you?
That's right, yes. Ghost Hunters were coming to Ireland, and they needed someone on the ground here and to help organize things and everything else. And because they were investigating Leap Castle among a few other places. And as fate would have it, when they arrived, one of their cast wasn't able to fly, so they had space for one more, and they needed the place filled. And they asked, would I consider going on screen? And up until that point, it hadn't even crossed my mind, because to me it was about Leap Castle and making sure everybody was fine and they were safe, more to the point. Mm-hmm. And they asked, would I consider going on screen? I said, yeah, that's okay, that's fine. And as it happened, that particular couple of shows happened to be one of the largest viewed shows up until that point of the show's history. And several months down the line, I got a phone call from Los Angeles, from the production team, asking would I consider being part of an international team in which we would travel the world, looking for evidence of paranormal and things like that. And I took several moments and thought about it and said, yeah, why not? And that was it. The rest is history. And we went on to film 3 seasons, hard seasons, but we went on to film 3 seasons around the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned Leap Castle there. I investigated Leap Castle back in 2016. Now, what is your memories of Leap Castle and filming that episode?
I do remember. I do remember Brian Harnois, when he came across. He set up the equipment, and he was just about to plug in the American the DVR system and everything else. And I stopped him at that point. I said, now you're running usually at 120 volts, where over here we run on 220. So we're doubling up. Are you sure you've got your system set to 220? Yes, everything's fine. And he plugged it in and everything blew. And the lights in the castle, everything went out. And he looked at me and I looked at him and I says, now you're in its territory. So there was some skulking around and trying to find new fuses for a lot of the equipment before filming could start again. But it was a joy as well. I remember Dustin was he was kind of antagonizing a lot of the stuff, and I would have brought him to the side and said, just be careful. And then if I remember right, Dustin then got the old 1-2 to the stomach, and he dropped like a stone. And so there was quite a few things going on. Leap Castle can be a strange place. I know it. I know it very, very well. There are things that can kick Lep Castle into action, and it's the entity of Lep is very like a sleeping dog, and I've learned by my mistakes that sometimes dogs just should be left sleeping, and but there are again there are several things that can kickstart Lep. But we also got to remember as well that Sean Ryan and his family, an amazing family, they live in the castle. So we have to be careful and try and find a medium between getting activity and remembering this is their home. And once we drive off, they've got to deal with things. So it's about finding that happy medium in between. And once you start going into the history of Lep Castle, you start finding a lot of strange stuff that was going on, and even the last owner there. I was sent up a copy of an article that she used to write in, and she had mentioned the entities at Lep. She said they are legion, and indicating that there were many. But the wording which she was using also indicated that she also practiced a particular occult path. So she was also interfering with what was going on at the castle as well. But the castle itself has a wonderful history, and certainly granted it's probably one of the most haunted castles in Ireland, but it also is quite funny as well, because during the bad times, when a lot of the places, the landlords and things were being burned, Lep Castle was not exempt from that. And when the guys came to blow it up and burn it, they initially the first night they burned it, but they gave them enough time to remove the furniture, and so all the furniture was pulled out. Then they set both wings on fire, but it left the medieval tower intact. So they came back with dynamite to blow up the tower, and went into the basement and found the wine. So they drank that much wine that they were afraid to let off the dynamite. That's why the tower is still there, because the guys had got that drunk, that they were petrified of blowing themselves to smithereens. Never mind the castle. So there are there's some humorous tales, of course, as well with Lep.
What did you experience when you were in the chapel? Because there was, I remember there was a time when I was up there, and it was kind of like a vortex that I kind of experienced. I remember being stood near to the window and having this overwhelming sense that I was either going to be pushed out, or there was somebody constantly running around me all the time.
Yeah, the chapel at the top is one of those places where a lot of the activity is centralized, and that in itself, it doesn't cause any problems to the owners, because they're a floor below. But for anyone investigating, yes, that is where they tend to get a lot of activity. One of the last times that I investigated Lep, we were on the verge of getting true paranormal manifestation. But one of the people that were with us freaked out at that particular moment, because the next stage was that we were going to be physically touched. We could already see them gathering around us at that particular point. So and this particular person just couldn't stick it. And the moment that was announced, everything faded off. It was as if they knew, okay, this isn't going to work. This person can't take this anymore, and they backed off. And so we never got to the crux of what possibly was going on. But yeah, that was the last times that I was at Lep that was happening.
Yeah, I remember the greenhouse area to the rear of the castle as well. There was quite a lot of old plants in there. There was quite they were quite old, and they were more or less on the verge of dying. And I just sat in there, and I was like, just talking to myself, and obviously being a medium, you kind of get into the zone, and it was kind of like I was made aware of a gentleman that came through, and obviously I thought it was Sean when I looked, because he just literally just breezed through, and he had the grey wild hair, and he just breezed through, and I just said, "Oh, Sean," and I looked, and there was nobody there. But then the next thing, I could hear metal being thrown in the greenhouse, but it was kind of like little coins. I picked up a coin, and it was tiny, and it was literally, it was smaller than a 1p piece, but I'd never seen it before in my life. And I actually picked them up because there was about 5 or 6 of them. And I picked them up thinking that somebody had thrown them. And I went everywhere looking for the people who I was with, and nobody were anywhere near me. The door was locked. So I had no idea where these coins had materialized from.
I used to live in a renovated Methodist church here in the west of Ireland, and I could remember time and time again the money that used to just materialize out of thin air and hit the wooden floor. And every day that you were sweeping up, there were copper coins all over the place. And it got to a stage where I shouted, "Stop giving me coins, leave me notes instead." Needless to say, it stopped.
It is funny. It is funny though, isn't it? And you know, going on from LAP, you know, you investigated the Fae. Now, obviously, I know you've investigated with my friends, but I want to understand why you came to investigate something that many of us would perceive as being these little tooth fairies, and you know, these little beings who bring a lot of joy and a lot of mysticism to the world.
Yes. Well, that in itself probably is one of the reasons why that I wanted to investigate. You see, moving on from the ghosts and everything else, I found was being quite restrictive in my own path, and I wanted to expand and see more. And being proudly Celtic, I have a very definite connection with land here in which I live, and I wanted then to examine the myth and folklore of the land, see if there was any spark there that possibly inspired the tales to develop. And quickly, I gotta say, we discovered that there is a lot of things going on around us that we're completely detached from. And by placing myself back into that environment, I was also seeing what our ancestors had seen 100, 200, 300 years ago, manifesting from the landscape itself. Now, the terminology of Fae is in itself an English term, but it's primarily the same thing. And this is something that I also seen in GHI when I got to interview people such as the Maori and representatives of the Zulu and right around the world. They were also saying the same thing, but they were giving it different names. So that's what I wanted. I wanted to really examine this and find out, well, what is it that they're actually seeing? And by placing myself back into that environment, that was it. It was quite an eye opener for me. Initially, I wrote the book Searching the She, and my findings there about that, which took me over some of the country and some of the tales therein. But you in England, you have this reference to the Fae. In Ireland, we would call them the She. But the She is also there's a problem here that we have to break apart, because the She is also the name of our Neolithic passage chambers. Okay. So these passage chambers dot the landscape are thousands of years old, but we also have this connection to these beings that are appearing and disappearing on our landscape, taking many different identities. But they were also linked to these passage chambers, and that in itself begs a really interesting question. Passage chamber, passageway to where exactly? because I know that from my own experience when I was up in the mountains and everything else, and not even having taken a cup of tea, I have to say that I have seen these people appear, and as quickly as they appeared, they disappeared. And I have no explanation as to how they did it, where they went, or anything like that. But once they knew that I was there, that was it for them. They were gone. And one other particular instance, I was on the same mountain when I had the use of a camera, and I was able to photograph two of them. Now, this is the strange thing, because although I was seeing two, the camera only saw one. And I thought, as a double vision, is there something wrong with my binoculars? What is going on here? Until I realized that the second figure was smaller than the first, and also slightly different colored jacket. So that's whenever I realized, okay, the camera is seeing what's really here, but to me, it's being betrayed that there are two.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, leads us down that particular avenue of glamour and everything else. They will show you what they want you to see. And again, looking at the aspect of the camera, this is one of the reasons why a lot of the work within the paranormal, the work within ufology, mythology and folklore and things like that, when you start delving in, start touching onto the true phenomena, it does not like cameras, because the camera doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to manipulate our conscious perspective, which has happened for centuries and centuries. But yeah, so it was interesting to see that connection there between the camera and what they were wanting me to see. And so that, of course, led into then, from following that particular book, Searching the She, I then went on to look at the Banshee, which is this portent of death within Irish mythology and folklore. And I have to say that within that particular book, I got to hear the Banshee myself. And I had heard it several times before that, but whenever it comes to your very house and announces itself, it literally scared the bejesus out of me in the middle of the night.
Is it true? Is it true that they do scream?
Yes. There is a distinct scream that comes from this particular entity. Now, this is the strange thing, because although I've heard it 3 times now, I can't describe it. But whenever I hear it, whenever I'm out in the landscape and things like that, when I know it's it, but I couldn't even try and explain what it's like, because there was nothing to compare it to. A lot of people would say, oh, it's a fox, it's a hare caught in a trap, it's something like that, and it's a normal piece of the landscape. No, it's not. This, I have to set the record straight, because when you hear it, it immediately kickstarts your fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
This scream, which announces that there is a death coming, is of great importance for those who hear it. That's why our fight or flight engages. If I was to go outside and I heard a fox, I've heard foxes many times. I've heard hares. I've heard people screaming many times. But when she announces her presence, that is something very different and very, very basic. It gets right down into our basic fundamental roots of who we are. And she activates that fight or flight. And that announces, this great importance that's about to unfold. So that in itself really sets her aside from the wildlife that's found within the land. And I think for me as well, I had personally a great upset, because I came across many references on the internet that said that if you hear the Banshee, you're going to die. And the Banshee hasn't been heard since 1945. That is not the case. These things were all wrong, because actually she has this sense of she has this gift that is able to announce that the death is coming. If there was a group of 10 people and 9 people hear it, it's the one that doesn't hear it is the one that's going to die. But, and this is of great importance, that when we understand that she has an element of empathy, because she doesn't alert the one who's going to die. You can imagine the fear that would be in someone having heard that and then wondering what else was coming and everything else. These people just slip into it. And it's the other people around who know that the death is coming. So that itself was interesting. And, you know, to this aspect that the Banshee hasn't been heard since 1945 was utter rubbish. Because I was interviewing people from right around the country, including myself. I got to hear it. And and even people, foreigners who had been coming to the island on holiday, were even having encounters with this and returning back to where they came from to find that there was the death of either a friend, family, whatever the case may be, back in their homelands. So that particular aspect, of course, led on to this greater, I suppose, road to travel, which has led me through mythology and folklore into the fairy realm, and then ultimately into ufology, where I was really slicing and dicing through the accounts of mythology from the past right up into the present, and having my own experiences as well, and using modern day technology, adapting modern day technology to allow us to identify areas within the planet that these things are more likely to happen, and having our own experiences outside of that as well. So yeah, it has been an amazing experience up to now, and it's culminated now, I think, within my next publication, which is coming out, called The Deceptions of Gods and Men, and we're hoping to have that out now by the summer. So
well, that's
it really
interesting.
delves into yeah.
Because we were going to touch upon, weren't we, about your new book and what you've got coming out in the future. But just before we go into that, are you still doing the tours and things like that around Ireland at the moment? Obviously not at the moment,
No,
but when we're allowed.
Nothing at all is happening, and because of the quite severe lockdowns that we're under, and although I live just a few kilometers from mountain treks and everything else, I still keep my foot on the ground and hike up the mountains and everything else. But the mainstay of the research has all been put on hold. There is an amazing story coming behind this one, which I can't even get into at this stage, but it delves into the aspects of the She and Mesopotamia, and what we have found here on the island, and all these inscriptions and everything else. So there's a bigger story coming behind this as well, which is absolutely amazing, but I can't go into it at this particular stage. And again, because of lockdowns, we can't fully investigate either.
Which is a bit sad, isn't it? But your new book, talk to me about that.
Now, the new book, Deceptions of Gods and Men, it looks at all of this phenomena from around the world and strips away the mask in which they have wanted themselves to be perceived as, and how we have perceived them. So it strips that all away and looks at and tracks by the phenomena itself, about how it interacts with us. And using old manuscripts and things like that, I've been able to track it back and see what our ancestors were dealing with, and also what they were learning, and how we've become almost blinded and sideswiped within this, I suppose, since the Victorian era, with spiritualism really ramping up and going for it. we have ended up in a situation which could be very, very challenging for us, because the
Yeah.
book itself brings this hypothesis forward based on this weight of knowledge left behind for us, and exposes what's behind this veil. And it's actually quite unnerving, I gotta say. In fact, I was speaking to Cormac Strain, my friend and co-author of Legend Seekers, and when I told him what I'm doing, he says, Barry, that's really frightening. And I said, you're telling me. But it's going to be a good book. It's going to be a great read, and it's a hypothesis, I suppose. It's based on a weight of historical content. So it's as good as anybody else's hypothesis.
It's quite funny though, isn't it? Because we talk about spiritualism and we talk about the Victorian era and things like that, but the invention of electricity, I've been doing some research on this quite recently. The spiritualism era kind of came to a big boom when electricity was invented, and people do state that the likes of mediums, and things like that had this huge boom because of the electricity and the energy that it emits. What's your take on
that? Personally, I don't think electricity has got anything to do with it. I think they will materialize no matter what we decide to do. However, they do create a deceptive aura around it, in which, for instance, within the seance room, we won't appear if there's extraneous light. It has to be dark and everything else. So again, we're left to this, and following some experiments, some amazing experiments that were done in 1995 up until 1998, in the east of England, within the seance environment, they got amazing evidence, but it was under stringent conditions such as darkness and everything else. However, 15 years before, the same phenomena was appearing in Livermore laboratories in the United States in broad daylight in front of the scientists. It was the same phenomena, but yet whenever this spin comes along, you can't use cameras, you have to be in total darkness, and all this comes along. So it makes it very, very difficult to try and investigate this particular phenomena, because the goalposts keep shifting. So again, this is not us that are shifting the goalposts. It's this deceptive aspect that is beyond the veil that is played out. I really think that we live in a society now where we have to have everything now. Everything has to be quick, and we no longer take the time to question what is coming through, to understand, okay, well, yeah, I understand that they're telling me this, but who are you? Can you give me some evidence to who you were, and things like that? That's not happening as much as it should be. In fact, it's very rare now for that to happen. And then we're led into situations where things will develop, and usually for the worse, as the experiments and things keep continuing on and on and on. And I think that there's an element of as well within the paranormal that a lot of folks, sometimes this is not their path, and they come into it and they're there for a little while and then they leave, and they've maybe had an experience. Sometimes they won't have an experience, and you'll have to forgive my use of the language here, but some people come in for shits and giggles, and that in itself can lead to difficulties further down the line, but not understanding that there can be problems, can happen by into this, and opening that door. I think a lot of folks are very, very critical of Ouija boards and things like that, and rightly so. Again, it's a lot of people who use it don't understand what's going on with it or what's coming through. But we have to remember as well that it's all about intent. And if you've got 4 people on that board who have got the intent of opening the door, the very fact if we have a voice recorder and we say, is there anyone there? We've just engaged intent.
Yeah.
We have just done the exact same thing as the Ouija board does, only it's 3 times as powerful. So we're very, very careful about what we're actually doing and the ramifications of that as well. But there are wonderful things to find out. And as I said, this book that's coming out certainly has gone a long way to strip a lot of that facade and expose this undercurrent that's behind it.
And it's true what you say though as well, you know, people who come into this, you know, for the giggles and you know, the kind of negative side of things, they don't usually last long, do they? Because the spirit world have this like you say, they work in different ways, and if you're in it for the wrong reasons, then they will push you out for the right reasons. It's not, you know, and I've seen, you know, we've seen firsthand, you know, we've seen these, you know, these TV shows who fake activity, who, you know, who keep, you know, making a mockery of the paranormal, so to speak. But you actually see them now, and, you know, these people who think that they're going to get somewhere by faking this activity, it's just a matter of time, isn't it, before the spirit world actually says, well, hang on a second, we don't want you anymore, you know, this is what's going to happen.
I definitely think that. I think with the modern age as well, you know, there's a lot of shows out there that keep the topic alive, which in itself is a good thing. You know, it inspires conversation and things like that. But on the downside to that, we've got people in it that maybe shouldn't be there, and we also got to look at what value are they adding to the investigative field. Who is continually giving the information back to the field? Who's continuing that instead of tech? Who's giving back to the field? It's interesting whenever you start looking at that and seeing who's giving back and who's taking. And as you rightly said, you know, those that tech usually don't last as well as they would like to.
And it's quite funny because I'm seeing an awful lot of that at the moment. You know, there is an awful lot of people in the field who do take, but there is an awful lot of people who give back and who do extensive research into the, you know, the paranormal, just like yourself, you know, and, you know, it just goes to prove that there is longevity within the field, because like everybody, we are always learning, aren't we? And, you know, if you're naive enough to think that you know everything, then you're just not going to get anywhere, are you?
No, absolutely. That is one thing that every day there's always a new lesson in it for me, and you know, I'm very grateful to be able to have that opportunity to learn from those lessons. It really is a big mistake to go into it and say, well, I know it all, because usually those are the ones that know nothing.
Yeah, is usually the case as well. What's your thoughts on the paranormal TV shows that we have at the moment? Like, you know, they like these captured clips and things like that, because we talked about the camera not lying, but how do you think people are perceiving these experiences?
There's a lot of problems with our technology now, which is creating difficulty. And certainly back in the around 2006, moving forward, our digital technology started producing these unusual orbs, which were flying around people's cameras, and they still do today. But even the camera manufacturers have released statements to say, folks, this is dust and water. It's a problem with the camera's design and the way that it focuses. It's a problem with digital photography. So when we understand that, then we can push a lot of that stuff to the side. But unfortunately, that still lingers around the surface. And I have caught a few of those shows that are still pushing the orb phenomena. Now, don't get me wrong. If that orb is producing its own light source
Hmm.
within a dark room, that's something that's worth holding on to. But when you've got an orb that's appearing in front of a camera that's using infrared, that's dust, folks.
Hmm.
And no getting out of it. And you can look at it to your heart's content and see all the faces that you want to in that particular dust orb, but it's dust. And it's a remnant of our digital technology. That's the problem that we're facing. You got to understand the technology
Hmm.
and what it's doing before obviously going into this and then shouting across YouTube or Facebook or whatever that you're the best ghost hunter in the world.
And it is quite funny because, I look in some of these groups and people say, oh, you've got a couple of orbs, and I just look at it now and I don't comment anymore, because I used to comment and say, no, that's just dust. But I think people get offended when it's not what they want to hear.
It's very, very difficult when someone sends you a photograph and said, can I get your opinion on this? Well, number one, you weren't there. You don't know the camera they're using. You don't know the people that were around them. You don't know the weather. You knew nothing about it. So it's very, very, very limiting on that. And I don't do that either anymore. I've stopped because when you give them the answer that they're not waiting for, it kind of way um, opens up a hornet's nest. But I'm very much of the opinion now, if you're out there and you're photographing and you're attempting to catch paranormal phenomena, then you should be experienced enough to analyze your own photographs.
Uh-huh. Definitely.
So that's where
What's
I
your
leave it.
most memorable piece of evidence that you've captured?
Oh my goodness, I was down in South Africa, or not South Africa, New Zealand, Tasmania. There we go. We're in the right area now. We were on the island of Tasmania, and Joe Chin was with me, and there was a beautiful church. It was burned out. It was a beautiful church up on the hill, and there was stars behind it. And I was using this camera that has a greater depth of field within the infrared spectrum and the ultraviolet spectrum. I said, I got to capture this moment because that's absolutely wonderful. I wasn't looking for anything. And I set the camera on the tripod and opened the shutter for 30 seconds. And lo and behold, a solid figure was walking out of the church. Solid. He was in mid-stride. But this is the thing. It was a 30-second exposure. For folks that know photography, he should have left a line all the way across my screen. He didn't. It was as if it was a freeze frame like that. He appeared and disappeared, but he was in solid state, mid walk in the middle of this shot. It was phenomenal. I to this day I can't disprove it.
It's amazing, isn't it? Especially when you get things like that when you've researched so heavily and you can't find an explanation for it. You
Yeah,
kind of have those little eureka moments, don't you?
you do, and even from the fairy aspect and everything else, the amount of encounters that we have, like those are memorable moments, and they leave the paranormal in its dust. I gotta say, in the last 10 years of doing Legend Seekers, I've had more experiences there doing that than I've had in almost 30 years of investigating the paranormal. And to the point where I said, if that ever happens again, that's it, I'm retiring. I don't want to be involved with that. And Cormac and I were investigating one particular location up on top of a hill, which saw this entity appear. It tore people from their beds at night, and it also clubbed a guy on the back of the head who fell forward whilst using a flat table saw and sawed off his fingers. They brought in dogs, these German shepherds, to secure the area from this particular entity. and this thing murdered the dogs. Now this is stuff that's in our landscape, and it's there, and it's got to a stage where the owner of this site will keep that within his family for as long as he can, because he will not allow anyone to do what he did, which was buy the property and try and use it, because that's when all this stuff started. So it's amazing to see how the landscape can turn against us sometimes, and how in our modern ways we have become more arrogant in our ways to say, well, I want to build there, or I want to open a mine there, and you go ahead and you do it without thinking, okay, well, what was here first? What is there? Is there something that our ancestors would have done? Which, it may look as superstition now, but let's face it, it may appease whatever may be there. So, it's just been absolutely amazing for us to do that. And of course, your friend Claire and her sister came across here to Ireland to have this experience with the she, and they had it, and in such a level that I have never experienced that before up until then, of that level of activity. And
she
they certainly,
yeah, she actually mentioned when you were in this heavy, what she said was a thunderstorm. She said there was rain all around, and they were at the campfire. There was not a drop of rain around the campfire. And she said all of a sudden they just saw like little lights and things just coming around. And she said it was just like, she said it looked like fireflies, but it weren't fireflies. She said there were. She says I seriously couldn't explain it in any other sense, but I know that she speaks so highly of that, and it's kind of one of those experiences that she said will always stay with her.
It was one of those places. It was a location that was known for this type of activity, but the storm that hit us the night before, I thought we were going to get blown off the side of the hill, and we had our campsite in place. Now we went to the top of the hill initially to go to their area, and I knew that was going to instigate then a return in which they would come to ours. And sure enough, that particular night they came, and they came in the worst of the storm. And I have never ever heard that before. And whenever it ran past the tent, the hackles went up the back of my neck. My fight or flight was engaging. My body was telling me, be prepared to move here, because there's something not good that's moving around. Whenever its heel hit the ground, it done this double slap on the ground, which I had never heard before, but they moved exceptionally fast. And then the following night, of course, we had the lights that appeared along with the shadows that were appearing behind us as well. So there was everything was going on. And you're right, we had the campfire lit, yet the rest of the valley was engrossed in this almighty storm. And yet we looked up and there were stars, and it stayed that way. It was just the power over the environment. I've seen this before. The power over that they have is phenomenal.
It is amazing. And it kind of, once I'd heard that story from Claire and her sister Lindsay, it was one of those kind of eureka moments for me, like a light bulb moment, because I was sat there thinking, I really want to understand a little bit more about this. And, where do I actually look for items to research on this? And, obviously you've come on the show now. Have you written any books about, the she and things, what you've experienced? Whereabouts can we buy them from?
If you pop over to my website, charmstealer.com, and you'll see a list of the books there, which touch on the fairy and their kin, so that the folks will be able to get it there, and the new book will be up there. It'll be announced there as well.
Okay, and that's coming out in the summer, you said, didn't you?
Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay, and when's the next one that you can't really divulge? When will that be available? I can't speak tonight.
Well, that one is it's been researched now since 2016. So every time that this is going forward, um, I was hoping that last year before the lockdown came that we were going to be able to move with this. But as fate have it, some of the items that we needed didn't arrive in time, so we were put on hold, which meant that we missed our opportunity because we only have one window of opportunity per year. So hopefully this summer solstice, we're going to hit it big time, and we'll have the evidence that we need, because I need to take that evidence to the university to have some items tested. And I have some stuff in the freezer, but it's no good. I need to have a fresh sample. So it's all exciting stuff. I can't wait.
That sounds so exciting. I mean, when we talk about paranormal, people automatically just assume that it's spirits. It's about, the spirits of deceased loved ones and things like that. But it isn't, is it? It's just a whole huge realm of the unexplained.
Yes, very much so, very much so. I was at Skinwalker Ranch, October 2019, just before this time arrived, and I was there and had an encounter there at the ranch. Now this is a place where, if like there's one particular ranch that was for sale beside Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, and the farmer had gone in just to view the ranch. The two buildings were empty, and he went in, just had a look around. He was only in the house 5 minutes, and he brought his dog with him. The dog stayed outside. When he came out, the dog was turned inside out. And it targets animals, in particular dogs, deer, alpaca, cows, everything. If it's eatable, it seems to target whatever these things are. And we find the same thing here in Ireland. We've got animal mutilations. I've come across many myself and taken photographs and everything else. And there is a farm in the north of the country, and two guys, Dermot Butler and Carl Nally, wrote an amazing book about these mutilations that were happening to the animals in the north of the country of Ireland. And I spoke to them and I said, I thought all these mutilations had stopped around the noughties. And he says, "Oh no, Barry. On our books, we've got over 500 of mutilations." And at the time I thought to myself, wow, 500. That's, for such a small island, that's actually very good. In a morbid sense, that's actually very good to have 500 animals. But he said, "No, Barry, I got to pause you there. That's 501 farm." So we don't know how many animals are being mutilated across the island of Ireland. Never mind Wales, Scotland, and England, and the rest of the world. And I just see a message come up there from Claire, so I'll say hi, Claire.
I did that on purpose. But these animal mutilations that we talk about, there are going to be quite a lot of undocumented mutilations, aren't there? Because, we live in a society nowadays where people tend to, don't want to perceive that it's real, do they? And we talk about UFOs, we talk about things not of this earth. However, we're constantly seeing unidentified flying objects. Is there a link between, these animal mutilations, or is it just physical land entities that are actually causing this phenomena?
Oh no, there is a direct connection. There is a distinct connection, but the connection in itself, we shouldn't try and pigeonhole that. Well, mutilations are connected with the UFOs. we need to strip away that outer mask because we're looking at the same phenomena across many spectrums.
Now,
In
I'm just
Ireland,
going to say this because this is just like, this is out there, and I've had this discussion with somebody previously. Now, the space, obviously, we live in a solar system, and space has this phenomenal experience of you know, how do I word this? Because I'm going to sound like I'm a bit stupid now, but I know exactly what I'm trying to say. But, you know, in space, we have this time that I perceive that we live in this quadrant, and we're experiencing things from other worlds that is causing phenomenon here on Earth, and it's certain paths that it takes, and that's where we experience the most paranormal phenomena. Now, this is, I sound really stupid, and I know what I'm trying to say, but trying to put it into scientific terms is not my strong point.
Yes. I think from our standpoint, what we're seeing is that there are certain magnetic connections to this phenomena that appears. Now, the phenomena, when it appears, is almost like a tulpa, almost like a thought manifestation. It appears and disappears. It will link to your conscious brain, but yet the one thing that we should determine the nature of this phenomena by is through our unconscious brain. It's through the seat of our psyche. It's through the seat of our psychic, through the seat of our soul. We need to listen to that voice. That quiet voice is the one that we need to listen to when dealing with these things, not the conscious brain. The moment it locks you with the conscious brain, they got you. And that is right across the spectrum. Because with the mutilations, for instance, yes, we've got the connections with the UFOs, but 100 years ago, we also had farmers here in Ireland who were having their cattle mutilated in the barn right beside the house. And their only regret is that they didn't put the iron up to stop the fairies, because it was the fairies who were doing the mutilations to the cattle. So the same mutilations, I gotta say, they're doing now, but under another mask. These things are not traveling across the gulf of space. They're all here. And we need to consider this aspect of dimensional travel back and forth. And there are huge amounts of material there that does describe this movement back and forth to a place which is exceptionally close to ours.
That's funny. That's just like, it's strange, isn't it, when you look into the paranormal and you look into kind of light signatures, and also, you know, the signatures of soil samples, but also of, you know, trees themselves and where they came from, but also animals that have kind of been so close to extinction. However, they're thriving in other parts of, you know, where they've never been seen before. You know, they've not been seen for hundreds of years, but all of a sudden they're in a different part of the world, which is not inhabited by any of us, but they're thriving. It's just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. It really is. It's for all the bad things that are going on, there's an exceptional amount of good things which is going on as well. So. But thanks to modern media, everything's bad at the moment. But if we can set it, if we can set that aside, you know, we do have some amazing things that are going on.
Yeah, and it's such a fascinating subject, and speaking to you tonight, I'm like, I'm in absolute awe. I am, and I'm not afraid to say that. You've probably been one of the most interesting people that I've ever spoken to on this subject, and I just want to thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Well, whenever the lockdown, if it ever ends, I'm not quite sure it will, but if it ever ends, we do have a farm in County Roscommon that has got allegedly some fairy activity, that if people stay there, they'll be run off the ground. So we'll be heading there next that'll be one of our next places of investigation to this particular camp in the middle of County Roscommon, where people are run off the ground by the ferry. So let's see. We'll give it a go.
I was going to say, that sounds like a very bold claim, doesn't it? So we'll have to see exactly what they have.
All the other stuff I've come across, not so much a bold claim anymore.
I think I need to research that a little bit more, actually, to be honest, and see all the stories. But I'm definitely going to buy your book, because I think,
thank you.
You know, the Fae is kind of, you know, something that I've never really come across until, you know, you start really looking into it, because we had the Cottingham fairies, you know, and we all know that, you know, there's reports of those being faked pictures, and, you know, the typical flower fairies, the beautiful little creatures. But, you know, they're not actually those beautiful little creatures, are they? I'd probably more say that they were like elementals.
Yeah. No, they're definitely not. But
no. So what's next for you? Have you got any TV coming up?
There was meant to be TV coming up, but like everything else, we're not allowed to leave the country, and they can't come to me. So we just got to wait. For me now, the next project is another book I have. It was written about 10 years ago, but now I'm bringing it forward to release it. Yeah, it's more for the kids, this particular one, before I move into this next project, which will be coming out next year, hopefully, or the year after.
That sounds good. And I do hope that you are able to open up your, you know, your small personal tours as well, because, you know, people like to experience this. And I think after this conversation, I think you'll have, you know, an awful lot of my personal friends who would absolutely love to come along. And well, I think Claire and I and Lindsay have already said that if you ever do another one, then I would definitely love to be there. But I just want to say, you know, if anybody wants to go and buy your book, head over to, is it your website, did you say?
My website is charmstealer.com.
Okay. And whereabouts can people find you online? Do you obviously have your own website, but do you have a Facebook or a Twitter account?
There's a Facebook there, Barry Fitzgerald GHI. That's it. And they can find me there, and they can contact me through that if they wish.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me and for chatting all about the Fae and all about what you've been doing. But stay just backstage when I just want to have a really quick conversation off screen. But I'm just absolutely honoured tonight to be speaking to you. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us as well. Don't forget, we've got other shows coming up during the week as well. So just carry on having a look at the Keep On Chatting network. And as I mentioned, I haven't been online as much on Facebook. So, you know, just if you need me for anything, just, you know, message. It's absolutely fine. But thank you so much for being on the All Talk Paranormal show tonight. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Take care, everybody. Stay safe and sleep tight.